concern may be genuine, many of these good-hearted people fail to fulfill their mission simply because all they have is a mission. A lack of business skills. Earlier in this book, I mentioned that many people spend years in school or at work developing skills that are not relevant or important to the BI triangle. I mentioned the example of a school teacher who may have years of education and teaching experience, yet those years of education may not transfer to the BI triangle if that person decides to become an entrepreneur. That person simply lacks business skills. When I left the Marine Corps in 1974, I too was in that predicament. By 1974, I had two professions. My first profession was as a licensed ship's officer, licensed to sail any ship of unlimited tonnage throughout the world. I could have made a lot of money with this profession. The problem was, I did not want to be a ship's officer anymore. My second profession was that of a military pilot with great training and years of experience. Many of my friends went to work for the airlines or with police and fire departments as pilots. I could have done the same thing, except that I no longer wanted to fly. In 1974, when I returned home to see my dad struggling financially, I suspected that I had found my new mission, or at least a problem worth solving. The problem was, all I had was a mission. When you look at the BI triangle, there are levels for people specially trained in accounting, law, design, marketing, and systems. There are not levels that say ship's officer or pilot. So I was just like the many people I mentioned above, people with a mission, but with a lack of real business skills. What I did have going for me was that I had years of apprenticeship to Rich Dad. I had worked in all aspects of the BI triangle through his businesses, so I did have some business experience, but only as a kid. At least I knew that a business was a system of systems, and I understood the importance of the BI triangle as a business structure. Complaining to Rich Dad. One day I complained to Rich Dad that I had almost no marketable skills that applied to the BI triangle. Pointing to the team side of the BI triangle, I complained that no major corporation would hire me to be on their team. I whined on about not having a formal education at any of the levels. After I was through complaining, I looked up at Rich Dad for what I hoped would be a sympathetic answer. All he said was, "Neither do I." A mission is all that Rich Dad started with. What a leader does. A leader's job is to change the company to allow it to grow and serve more people. If the leader cannot change the company, the leader keeps the company small and the company may begin to shrink. Once again, I use the BI triangle to further clarify this point. When I was in the S quadrant, our products were the business school for entrepreneurs and the business school for investors. The problem with the business was that I was too much a part of the product as well as the rest of the BI triangle. If I was going to be a leader, I needed to stop and completely redesign the business. Trying to fix a poorly designed business while the business is running is like trying to change a flat tire while the car is still moving. That is why Kim and I stopped and took 2 years off before we started a new business. Building a new BI triangle. In 1996, when I came out of the mountains around Bisbee, Arizona, all I had were pencil sketches of the cash flow game board, a rough draft of Rich Dad Poor Dad in my computer, and a simple 2-page business plan. As the sole employee of my yet-to-be-formed company, I knew my next step was to find the right people and put a team together. Sketching the game board was the easy part. Finding someone who could engineer the information systems required to make the game work was the first step. The game had to be engineered to literally change the way people think about money. At that time, there was only one person I knew who had such a mind. That was an old friend named Rolf Parda, fondly known as Spock. We call him Spock because he looks like Leonard Nimoy of Star Trek fame. He also happens to be as smart as the character Nimoy played. This is where the 4 types of thinking are important. For this phase of the business, I brought the C thinking and P thinking to the project. I was creative enough to sketch a crude game board design, and I understood how people learned from my 10 years of teaching. Spock brought the T thinking and A thinking to the project. As a trained CPA with an MBA and a former banker with an extremely high IQ, Spock lives in a world of his own. Very few people can carry on a conversation with him. He speaks a dialect of English I doubt anyone else understands. Arriving at his home, I spread my crude sketches and diagrams on his dining room table. Doing my best to communicate by words, gestures, and pointing at my sketches, Spock and I finally began to converse. It is tough being the creative and people side of the project, speaking to what I hoped would be the technical and analytical side. Finally, about an hour into the discussion, Spock's eyes lit up. He was beginning to understand the people and creative side. "Why do people need this game?" he asked. "This is common sense." Chuckling, I replied, "To you it's common sense. You have an MBA, you're a CPA, and a former banker. So to you, this is common sense. But to the average person, this is a foreign language. For many people, this is a radically new way of thinking." Spock grinned. The points on his ears grew a little longer. "Give me 3 months, and I'll give you what you want." We agreed upon a price for his services, shook hands, and I left feeling confident that I had found the right person for the task. 3 months later, and after much interaction with me, he had all the complex mathematical equations done. I had done my part and made better crude sketches. Together, Kim, Spock, and I played the game. Surprisingly, the game ran well. It was a tough game, but the numbers worked, the lessons were revealed, and we were happy. The next person I went to see was an intellectual property attorney to begin the process of filing for patents, trademarks, and other legal fences to protect my intellectual property. Spock went back to work with his A-thinking cap on, using his analytical mind this time, and began back-testing the game on a computer. He ran the game through 150,000 different simulations without a failure. When he handed me his pages of mathematical computations, he was grinning from ear to ear. The challenge of the project had made him very happy. To this day, I have no idea what the math on those pages meant, but when I turned those same pages over to my attorney, he grinned just like Spock. I felt like I was in school again. The 2 A students were going over test papers and enjoying it, and I, the C, D, and occasional F student, wondered what they were so excited about. As you may have already guessed, I was now building a new BI triangle. As entrepreneurs, Kim and I were clear on our mission. Now, as leaders of the project and using the 5 levels inside the triangle as a guide, we were now putting together a team. After about a month, my attorney called and said, "You can now move forward and show your game to other people. We do not have a patent yet, but I have filed the application and you've staked your claim. You still need to have people sign confidentiality agreements before they see your product." As you may recall, this is the step I left out when I created the Runner's Shoe Pocket Wallet. Within weeks after inventing the product, I began selling the shoe pocket without protection. In less than 3 months, our competitors were selling my creation. It was a devastating mistake. But learning my lesson from that mistake was about to pay off in a very, very big way. The big test. For the next few weeks, Kim, Spock, and I worked to get our prototype games ready. We had played the game with a number of our friends, and the game worked well. The reason the game worked well is that all of our friends are professional investors. Now we were about to beta test the game. A beta test is a trial run to see if the game works with the average player. The game at that stage was just rough sketches on heavy butcher paper, and we used different caliber bullets as game pieces. The bullets worked well because their weight helped keep the paper down. We reserved a hotel conference room, enough for about 20 people, and then began calling people, mostly strangers, to come and play. You have no idea how hard that was. When people found out the game was an educational game about investing and accounting, most people found an excuse to not be there. "Does it require math?" asked one person. When I said yes, he hung up. The game is played. One bright Saturday morning, in walked 9 people. One who agreed to be there simply did not show up. After a few niceties, the game was on, and it went on and on and on. There were 2 tables, one table with 4 people and one with 5. After about 3 hours, one person raised her hand to signal she had won her game. The game had worked for one person, and the game went on and on and on. Finally, at about 1 p.m., we shut the game down. Frustration was so high, I thought fights were about to break out. No one else had gotten out of the rat race. No one else had won the game. As people left, many politely shook my hands, but no one said much. Most just gave me a strange look and left. Decision time. After packing up our boxes, Kim, Spock, and I had a debriefing session. "Maybe it's too hard," I said. Kim and Spock nodded. "But one person got out of the rat race. She won the game," said my perpetually optimistic wife,